Installing Git is a little bit different in different operating systems, but Git will work the same on every machine if you configure it properly. In this video, I'm going to tell you how to install and configure Git properly. If you're using GNU Linux or macOS, chances are you already have Git on your machine. To check if you have Git installed or not, you need to open your terminal. You probably know what terminal is and how to open it, but only for those of you who do not know, there is a CLI or command line interface in your machine that allows you to control your system by entering commands. In Windows, it's called command prompt, and to open it, you need to click on the search icon and type cmd, then hit enter. In macOS, its name is terminal, and you can find it by holding the command key, then hitting the space key and type terminal. In GNU Linux machines, I hope you know how to work with terminal, because GNU Linux users are usually familiar with this environment. But if you're not, you should look for it in your applications menu, which is usually called terminal or console. But note that each person may have a different appearance of terminal, even if your operating system is the same, because many people, such as me, like to customize this environment the way they like it. Of course, the inputs and output of Git commands are the same, only the appearance of the outputs may look different or prettier sometimes. Now I'm on Mac, so command space then term. As you can see, there's a terminal app here, but I'm not going to use that. Instead, I'm going to use this one, iTerm, which is just like terminal, except it's kind of better, at least for me. But you can use terminal, but if you want iTerm, just Google iTerm too, okay? Now, as you might already know, all the Git commands start with Git and followed by a specific parameter. Now, to test whether Git is installed on your machine or not, enter this command in your terminal, then hit enter. Git version. If the output was something like this, that means you have Git installed on your machine. So your terminal detected it and shows you the proper result. But if you're not seeing this, don't worry, because I want to tell you how to install Git on your machine. Or if you have an older version of Git comparing to me, please update it so you can come along with everything we do in this or future videos, okay? To install Git on macOS, if your macOS version is higher than 10.9, I guess, you can easily install it on your machine by typing Git in the terminal and hitting enter. And if it's installed, it will detect the command and show you some tips about Git. Or if you're using Homebrew package manager, you can install it with brew command. Just type brew install Git. I really suggest you guys to do this, even if you already have Git on your Mac, because this way you can have the latest version of Git, and Homebrew is a really good package manager if you don't have it already. If you don't know what a package manager is, it's kind of like the App Store on your Mac or Microsoft Store on Windows. But instead of that fancy looking interface, it's command based. You enter a command on your terminal to install an application or a package. So to install this package manager, just go to brew.sh. After you install brew, just type brew install git and you're good to go. As you can see, I already installed Git. You can also visit Git website to see other ways to install Git on Mac. SCM is short for Source Control Management, if you didn't know that already. Here you can select your operating system and see the best way to install Git on it. There is also a simple GUI installer for Git on Git website, but it's always a couple of versions behind the latest version. After you install Git, to check if Git is installed properly or not, you can enter the git version command one more time in your terminal, and if it worked, then congratulations, you can start using it now. If you're using Linux distros, it depends on the distribution you use as well as your package manager tool. For example, on Ubuntu and Debian systems, you can use sudo apt install git. You can see Arch, Fedora, and other distros here too. It really shouldn't be a problem for you. Just copy the command for your distro from here, paste it on your terminal, then hit enter. Just remember, you probably need the root access on your Linux machine to install Git. To install Git on Windows, you can go to the official Git website and download the file directly from that. To use Git, you have to have a Unix-like environment, and you have that in both Linux and Mac. But in Windows, well, you can download and install it. So in Windows, first we need to install an Unix-like environment. There's a great one that comes with Git pre-installed, even it's optimized for Git. Its name is Git Bash. Bash stands for Born Again Shell, and you can download it directly from Git website. It's like the Windows command prompt, except that it emulates the Unix environment, so you can actually use Unix commands on it. You can use this instead of your Windows command prompt, so use this one. With that, you can come along with everything I'm going to do in this video. After you install Git and check that Git has been installed successfully with the git version command, you'll need to set some variables to configure the Git environment. But before that, I'm going to show you another useful command from Git that helps you to use and understand almost all of the Git commands, and that's the help command. Just type git help git in your terminal and hit enter. See a manual page for the git command. You can browse this page with your arrow keys on your keyboard, or use the space key to go to the next page. Or if you want to search a word in this page, just type slash, then type your word and hit enter. You can find next page by hitting the N key, and for quit, press Q. So if you forgot how a command works, just use the help command, then you're good to go. Now, as you may know, Git stores our project changes along with details like the person who made the change and when and why that change happened in the repository. So we need to provide for Git that information. If we don't give that information, we can save snapshots from the project in the repository. We can set the user data like username and email with the git config command. We can set your configuration variables in 3 levels. System level, that is where you set the configs for all users in your machine. In other words, for the whole system, which is stored in most Unix-like systems in the etc directory in a file named git config. But in macOS, it's probably in the user directory, then local, then etc. In Windows machines, you can find it in your C drive, program data, Git, and the config directory. Or you can set it for each user, or in other words, globally, that is stored in your user home directory. Or set it for each project locally. So the configuration file is in your project directory like this. Your project directory /git subdirectory and the config file. You don't need to edit git config files directly. Git will automatically do that for you by using the git config command. But you can also change that file too. Note that each level overrides values in the previous level. For example, if the user you've set in the project is Ali, but your global user is Anna, Git uses Ali information for that project. If your global setting is Anna and your system settings user is John, Git will use Anna information for that project. If there will be no local config, okay? The Git configuration file is just like a key value database where each key can have one or more sections. So we just need to initialize them. So let's set the username. Go to your terminal if you're not already there. Then type git config user as a key. Then specify the section. In this case, name. But if we don't specify the section we want, Git gives us an error. Look. Okay, so don't forget to specify the section. Now if I hit enter, it returns its value, but it's empty because we haven't initialized it yet. So let's set a value for it. Just put the value after the command. Look, git config user.name, then your name, see? And if your values include spaces, you need to put them in double quotations. By default, if you don't put any parameters for this command, Git will store these settings for you locally, which we talked about earlier, but usually people set these settings globally. If I now hit enter, it will show us an error that there is no Git repository in this directory, so Git cannot set it locally. But as I said, most of the time, people set this globally. So let's do that first. Git space, then next parameter, config for configuration, then the environment that we want to set this value. In this case, global. So -- global. But you can use -- system to set this for the whole system, or -- local if we were in a Git directory. But for now, let's set this globally. Then the key and the section that we want to set. In this case, user. So user.name. And finally, the value. Okay, that's my name. Now let's set our email for Git by typing git config -- global, then user, and this time the email section. User.email. And because it's an email address and has no spaces, we don't need to put it in double quotations. Okay, that's a long email address. After you typed your email address, hit enter. But note that usually the username and email you enter here are the same as the user information you have in GitHub or GitLab. It's optional, but please don't put some dummy info here because it's important. It's going to be in your project's history. Okay? If you want different identities for different purposes, like one for work, one for your open source projects, you can force Git to look for your identity only within your local config, which is in your project repository. This way, you can have a specific config for each project. To do this, just type git config -- global user.use config only. Space, then true. So this way we will disable auto detection for Git to find our global or system-wide configuration. So if you forgot to set your user info locally, Git will throw an error that would say no email or password was given and auto detection is disabled to search for your globally or system-wide configuration. So this way we force Git to use only our local config. When you set the use config only option to true, then you no longer need your global config, so you can remove it this way. Just type git config -- global -- onset to onset, then specify the key and the section you want to onset. So user.name. Then for email, git config -- global -- onset user.email. Now let's test the values we set are stored properly or not. So type git config -- list to list all the configurations. These are my settings that are probably different from yours, especially if you're using Mac. Mac sometimes has some preset stuff for Git. Anyway, we can get one section using get option. Look, git config -- get user.name. Cool, huh? Okay, you may already set the default editor for Git, but to change it, we can use the config command for that too. You need to set the default editor for Git because many of the Git features require an editor, such as writing messages for a change we want to commit. So it's better to do it with an editor that you're comfortable with. Git uses Vim by default, which is not very user-friendly. So I personally do most of my daily work with VS Code, but I use Vim for Git commits and other Git stuff. But you can choose any editor you like. I'm going to show you how to set this up for VS Code because it's the most popular editor these days. But if you want to set this for another editor, you need to do it yourself, but it's kind of the same. To use VS Code for Git, you should be able to open it from your terminal, like this. But don't worry if you get an error in the terminal that says it doesn't recognize the command or something like that. First, make sure you have the latest version that you can download from the VS Code website. And if you're on Windows, check the box that says add VS Code to your path when you're installing Git Bash. And if you still can't open it to your terminal, if you're on Windows, just add the VS Code path to your paths and you can Google it. It's really easy to set up. If you're on Mac, it's even easier. Just open VS Code manually in the menu items, select View, then select Command Palette. Okay? After that, just type shell command in the command palette and then click on install code command in path option. Then you can open VS Code through your terminal. Easy peasy. For Linux, just try this command to create a symbolic link for VS Code. Sudo ln-s to create a symbolic link, then type the path to VS Code. Then user local bin code. Now to set VS Code as a default editor for Git, just type this command. Git config -- global to set it for our user. Now this time the core key. Core dot then editor as a section, then the value that is code. Space -- wait because it has spaces. Then hit enter. Wait flag is for the terminal to wait until we're done with VS Code, okay? One of the great uses of configuring our favorite editor as a default for Git is that now we can edit the whole Git configuration file through that editor. How? Just type git config -e. E is short for edit. Or we can filter it by the level of the config file. For example, git config -- global or -local or -system. Now, if we take a quick look at the terminal, we can see that it's waiting for us to close the editor. So this was for VS Code, but you can use your favorite editor too. You can even use its path if you still have a problem with running VS Code through your terminal. Here's another way. Just type git config -- global core.editor and the path to the executable file of that editor. Another important configuration is to configure Git to how to treat with the end of the lines in your text files in different operating systems. If you're a programmer, you're probably familiar with \n, \t, or \r. But if you don't know about them, they're just special characters that will affect the characters that come after them. \n is short for new line. It takes the next characters to the new line. As an ASCII controlled character, we call this line feed. Another one of the skip characters is \r, which takes the next characters to the beginning of the line. As an ASCII controlled character, we call this carriage return. But why I'm telling you all this stuff? Because different operating systems treat differently with end of the lines. In Windows machines, end of the lines are stored as \r, \n, but in Unix systems, it's just \n. In old Mac systems, it was only \r, but now it's only \n, just like Linux. I know, it's a little complicated. This problem appears times like when one person in your team uses a macOS and you want to clone the project from his or her repo on your Windows machine. And when you check the status of the Git repo, you'll notice that all the files are modified. Or I heard that some versions of the Eclipse IDE saves some files as CRLF or carriage return line feed, no matter what OS you use. Well, that's problematic, right? You can configure Git to solve this problem automatically. You can use the core key to set the auto CRLF section with git config command, which stands for carriage return line feed. In Windows machines, just set it to true This will remove CR characters from the end of the lines when we're adding files to the Git repository. It also adds CR characters to the end of the lines when we want to get files from that repository. On the other hand, for Unix-like machines, set it to input. So Git will check it only when we're trying to add files to the repo. This way, Git normalizes it to LF if it has a CRLF characters, so that prevents problems like the Eclipse ID problem. I'm going to show you how to set it up to solve this, but I think there's a better way to solve the end of the lines problem in Git, and I will show that to you after this. Now, because I'm on Mac, I type this, but it's the same for Linux users too. So git config --global for global configuration for my user, core as a key dot auto crlf or auto carriage return line fit section, then type input. Now hit enter. But if you have a Windows machine, you should type this, git config --global core dot auto crlf, then true. Okay, but as I said, there's a better way to do this. Why a better way? Because this way some problems can happen, like the fact that you need to tell everyone in the team to configure their machines, and it can cause problems. Or what if Git accidentally considers a binary file as a text file and then try to remove or add line ending characters to it? That's really terrifying, right? A better way is we should somehow configure the repo so when people clone it to their systems, Git will automatically know what to do with the line endings no matter what system people use. But how? We can do that by creating a file named .gitAttributes at the root of our project directory. Note that this file has no extension. We need to put it on our root directory of our project, so let's first create a project directory by make directory command. But you can also do this in your GUI file explorer apps. I'm going to make this directory on my desktop, so first change our current directory path to desktop using cd command. Cd stands for change directory to desktop. Tilde symbol is the home directory of our current user. Make directory, I'm going to name this directory git-tut for tutorial for short. Let's go to this directory using the cd command, cd git-tut. Then let's create the .gitAttributes file using the touch command, touch.gitAttributes. Now if I list this directory contents with ls, it will show us nothing, because by default every directory that its name begins with a dot is hidden in most operating systems. But we can see hidden files with ls-a. With a flag, we can see the directories which their names begin with a dot. Now, if we open this directory by VS Code, so code dot means open our current directory. As you can see, VS Code realized that this is a Git file. Now here we can set our rules. Like we can force Git to automatically decide which file is text and which file is not, and automatically normalize the line ending by the asterisk symbol. Asterisk means all the files. Asterisk text equals auto. This means Git will convert text files to OSS line ending on checkout and back to LF on committing changes to the Git repository automatically. We can even create comments using the hash sign, or we can ignore the OSS line ending and set it by ourselves. Look, asterisk means all the files, space, text, consider all the files as text, EOL, that is short for end of line, equals what we want, CRLF or LF. It was for checkout, so we can add another line for when we save changes in the Git repository. Just after this line, look, asterisk text space EOL equals LF. Okay, or we can set it for a specific file like a JavaScript file. Look, asterisk core.js, text, it means consider all JS files as text, then EOL equals CRLF or LF. And again, this is only for the checkout operation. Or we can tell Git to consider a file as a binary file. Look, asterisk, consider all .jpg files as binary files. This way Git doesn't consider binary files as text files. I know it's a bit tricky, but trust me, it's very useful, especially if you're working in a team. Okay, save and back to the terminal. Now let's check all the configurations we've set again. Git config -- list. See, our Git attributes file configuration settings is not here because it only belongs to this repo and stored in that file, not even in our local config file. Okay, if you're using the .git attributes way to solve the line ending problem, then you no longer need auto CRLF way. So just set it to false, then you're good to go. Git config -- global core.autocrlf false. I really suggest you guys the .git attributes file and set it to false to prevent conflicts. Another tip for the config command is that you can check what settings are coming from where. How? Just type git config -- list as we did before, but this time add another parameter -- show origin. See, some of my settings are globally and coming from my user path and my user.git config file, and a config from my system config that is in the etc directory. If you just want to know where a specific key is coming from, just type git config -- show origin without the list flag. Then type your section and key like core.editor. So that was it. All the things you need to know before start actually using Git. But of course, you can do other configurations too and customize it to your liking. As a practice, you can just type git help config and read its manual page and change some of it. Then unset them or check where are they coming from. It'll be fun. So have fun and see you in the next video.